Welcome to What Would Sabrina Say? I'm Sabrina Duong, and I'm excited you're joining me today. In this podcast, I dive into mental health topics on relationships and overall well-being. With over 20 years of experience as a licensed clinical social worker, I share insights and invite expert guests who are passionate about making a positive difference. I started this podcast because I was frustrated with the often misleading or recycled information in social media involving self-help and the mental health field. My goal is to provide you with genuine, useful content that's educational and informative. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you find our conversations both enlightening and empowering. I'm glad you're here. Hi, so I'd like to welcome Meghan Schrumm with us today. So excited to have you on and talk about such an important topic. It's great that women are talking about menopause, perimenopause, and what to expect. Get into the topic today.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for having me, Sabrina. I'm so excited to be here. Yes, my name is Meghan. My background's in social work, so I'm a registered social worker. I worked in clinical social work in hospitals and community for several years before I had some kiddos, and then took some time off to raise them, and then really started to dive into what do I want to do as I'm approaching, this next phase of life. I just turned 40, and I decided, you know what, I'm so passionate about nutrition that I really wanted to go back to school. So I did that, and I did a 1-year diploma through the Institute of Holistic Nutrition, and I'm now a certified nutritionist. And through that journey, I found how, again, I was in my 40s now, early 40s, and I was noticing all the changes happening to my body, how I needed to make some adjustments. And I really noticed how interconnected the mind-body lifestyle connection is. So I decided to take my practice to focus on women going through midlife, dealing with some of the stressors, some of the challenges that I was going through myself, and really figuring out how to support them both emotionally, mentally, but as well as lifestyle through nutrition, exercise, sleep, and all that good stuff. So I have a practice now where I support women through counseling, either mental health counseling, so dealing with anxiety, depression, things like that, or more lifestyle counseling. So working on nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, water intake, all those things. So I do one-on-one counseling and workshops and lots of fun things like that.
That's great. What are the signs and symptoms of perimenopause?
So the official definition of perimenopause is your cycle changing by consecutive months, plus or minus 7 days. So 1 month, it might be 21 days. The next month, it might be 29 days. The next month, it might be 19 days. So that's the official definition of perimenopause. However, there's multiple women in the world that have consistent cycles, but their body is showing them different symptoms of perimenopause. So perimenopause can start, into 35, even some women might start noticing different symptoms, but it's looking again, irregular cycles or periods might be heavier. They might be lighter. They might last longer. They might be shorter. So all over the gamut in that respect, but also the hot flashes, the night sweats, sleep changes, mood swings, having experiences with like anxiety or anger that they've never had before, brain fog, changes in their libido, and then shifts in their body composition. So storing body weight in different places where they had not been before. How is stress impacting? If weight, for example, is your main concern, how is stress impacting your weight changes? And how can we work on stress to work towards getting that excess weight off or helping with that weight management? We also look at sleep. So we deep dive into sleep, and there's a correlation between sleep and weight. And then, of course, we look at exercise and we look at water intake and nutrition, of course. So we're looking at more like a holistic model to see how all these different pillars of health are really impacting whatever issue you're having, because so often it's not a one situation only. Like, it's not just the food that you're eating that is potentially causing the weight. It could be the sleep. It could be stress. It could be the lack of movement. It could be a lot of different factors. So maybe they're taking care of their aging parents, but they also have kids at home. Maybe they're stressed with transitions going through as their adult children are moving off to university, and that's a new stage of life for them. Maybe they are, just peaking in their career, and then they're having all of these other symptoms come up and trying to figure out how they're managing that. Maybe they're going through relationship stressors with their partner because, they've been living kind of separate lives for a lot of the time. If they've got kids, maybe they haven't made time for their relationship. And now as their kids are getting older, they're trying to navigate this new lifestyle together, both of them. So there's lots of different areas and on top of nutrition that might need to be, dove into deeper with somebody like a holistic nutritionist who will look at the big picture.
So what would be the symptoms then for menopause?
Right. So menopause is officially diagnosed when you have 12 consecutive months without a period. So that's the official diagnosis of menopause. And then the symptoms can overlap with perimenopause. So the hot flashes, vaginal dryness or irritation is a big one as well. Joint pain, fatigue, again, ongoing sleep or mood changes as well. The brain fog. So yeah, the main difference is that there's no actual cycle happening anymore. So the main thing is, again, if you're having some symptoms like, hot flashes, if you're having mood swings, if you're having the brain fog, if your periods are changing, it could very well be perimenopause, but it's also really good to talk to your doctor to rule out any other causes because sometimes there's nutrient deficiencies that can mimic certain symptoms that you're having, or there's other things that are going on that might be causing heavier bleeds. So it's really good to talk to your doctor to see and make sure that these symptoms are related to perimenopause or if it's caused by something else. So that would be the starting point, is just to go and, have that discussion with your healthcare provider. And then also ask about doing some blood work to try and figure out if there are nutrient deficiencies. Maybe there's low iron from heavier bleeds. Maybe there's a B12 deficiency. Maybe there's a vitamin D deficiency. Maybe there's a thyroid imbalance. So these types of things that can be changed and can have, relatively easy fixes depending on what it is that might then alleviate some of the symptoms. And it might not necessarily be perimenopause, or it might be perimenopause that you can then rule out based on that blood work. Asking about treatment options. So what treatment options are available to me, both lifestyle, hormonal, non-hormonal, to find out what your options are and have those discussions. And then also looking at personal health risks. So you might have some other, sex or genetic related risk factors that could make this experience either more significant or could make your, future health concerns more significant. So for example, us being female, we have some sex specific risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So having that discussion with your doctor to say, as I go through this transition, I want to make sure that because, I've had an early period, for example, that's one of them, or I have PCOS, that's another one. Because I have those, those already sex specific risk factors, that puts me at a higher risk of cardiovascular disease as I'm transitioning through this next phase, which I know has an impact on my cardiovascular system. How can I best optimize my health? What can I best do to make sure that my risk as low as possible given these other circumstances?
Great. Yes. To have blood work and tests and then talking about next steps, certainly helpful advice. What effects would perimenopause or menopause have on women's mental health? I sometimes think there's, some stereotypes or jokes that go along with that, but I think it's helpful to challenge any myths as well too, and support women who might be experiencing other symptoms.
Absolutely. So hormonal shifts can impact the neurotransmitters as well as the sleep quality, and that directly can impact your mood. 100%. So especially if you've had prior mental health issues in the past, like anxiety or depression, these can actually worsen during perimenopause and during the menopause transition. So because of those hormonal shifts. So from a social work lens, it's not just looking at, biology, though. It's not just looking at those neurotransmitters. It's not just looking at your past. It's also looking at those life stressors that I had mentioned before. So looking at the caregiving roles, the career shifts, identity changes that you're going through, even the thought of, not being fertile anymore. Like, what does that even mean for some women, right? Like, that's a really big deal. Or if women are struggling to even have a child, perhaps, and they're reaching that perimenopause stage or that, impending menopause stage, and they haven't had a chance to have a baby yet. That can be a really big deal for a lot of people and can really be a big mental stressor. On top of the biological changes that come with the neurotransmitter changes because of the hormones, it absolutely, again, is multifactorial, and the lifestyle factors can also trigger some mental health concerns that may or may not have been there before.
Okay. So that's great to know that, again, with the mind and body being connected, there's likely to be some changes there.
Absolutely.
What would be
helpful, I guess, to know in terms of menopause and how long it lasts for in with these symptoms, whether it is around sleep, mental health, symptoms, hot flashes.
Yeah, exactly. And this question's hard to answer because it's so unique for each individual. So some women have told me that they didn't have any symptoms at all, in fact, and that they kind of just flew through menopause and the only real indication for them was their cycle stopped. And then other people, unfortunately, do struggle with symptoms for a lot longer. So some people will have symptoms for anywhere from 4 to 10 years. And even after their cycle stops and they've officially hit menopause, some women will still experience those hot flashes for quite some time after. So the transition is truly unique for each person. Some will have more disruptive symptoms, others will have less so disruptive symptoms. So it's just really individual.
Is that genetic as well? Because sometimes I do hear it even talk to my own family. It's like, oh, well, I didn't start menopause till this time and didn't have hot flashes, or I did. So your time should be the same. Like, is there a bigger genetic component to it, or it is still case by case?
Yeah. So the best predictor of your menopause experience will be what your mom's menopause experience was. So there is definitely a genetic component in that respect. So if you're lucky enough to have your mom around still, you can talk to her about her experience, and yours may very well mimic hers quite closely. But at the same respect, it may not. The other difference too is that access to supports is quite different now than how it was perhaps when a lot of our moms have gone through menopause. So it's quite a different scenario now than it was back then, which is good and can provide a lot of relief and support for women.
Great. That's good to know. I'm looking forward to talking about some of those resources in a bit. What would be some coping tools for changes in sleep and mood that women experience?
So there's, of course, for insomnia, again, we have to look at what's the root cause, what's causing that insomnia. There's certain things that are like, the sleep hygiene basics, right? So we want to have a cool room, fan, of course, nearby. We want to have a dark room. And of course, even like having earplugs if needed to have that sound out, because even if, people think that they're having a really great sleep, that if they have a light on in, the hallway or in their room even, or if somebody is, teenage kids are coming home late and they're making noise, that can all disrupt your sleep quality, even if you don't realize it. So trying to, again, make your space as quiet and calm as possible. If you have a partner who's a loud sleeper, perhaps considering, separating your sleep during this time, because it is so important to prioritize your sleep, because that directly in turn affects your mood. So if people don't have great sleeps, they're not going to be feeling their best the next day. And also they're going to have less capacity to deal with life stressors. So you really need to make sure that, you're protecting your sleep as much as possible. So watching those sleep hygiene, things that you can control, right? But then also like looking at a consistent bedtime and a consistent wake time is super important as well. So treating your weekends kind of like your weekdays, this whole theory of sleeping in can really impact your sleep as well. So again, just trying to wake up and go to bed at the same time each day. And limiting your caffeine and your alcohol. So especially women going through perimenopause and menopause can be quite sensitive to alcohol and caffeine in terms of triggering night sweats and hot flashes. So that can be a direct correlation. Also, it can really, really impact your sleep quality. So watching your consumption of those two things, having like stressful conversations right before bed, that can also definitely impact your sleep.
Definitely.
I do CBT for insomnia. So it is very much a structured program if that's something that you are, struggling with.
That's great. So those are helpful tools for coping with sleep changes and mood. And of course, as we mentioned, lack of sleep does affect mood. I'm wondering about any nutritional advice that you'd like to share.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really educating about alcohol, because a lot of times people think that alcohol will kind of make them drowsy and help them have a great sleep. And in fact, it might help them get to sleep faster, but their sleep quality is greatly impacted from it. So we talk a lot about really kind of watching that caffeine and watching that alcohol consumption, even watching it with teas and with sugar and chocolate, things like that, and how that can disrupt sleep. The role of potentially a magnesium supplement before bed can also help with some people to get a better sleep. And then just making sure, again, like they're getting enough protein and whatnot at their dinner time, at their meal time, so that their blood sugar is stabilized throughout the evening and overnight, so that they're not waking up from potential blood sugar lows.
Definitely. I think it's amazing how many of us are not having enough protein or water. And that's one of my goals right now, is to just really hydrate.
Yeah.
And understanding the importance of that and filtering out things in our body, and not ignoring, those cues and what's helpful to restore.
Water is so many different things. I mean, some people will say that they're hungry, they're having more cravings, but in fact, they're dehydrated. I had a client who was struggling with hot flashes, and, she said she wasn't drinking enough. And I said, well, water is like a really, really important thing if you're struggling with hot flashes. So there's lots of roles of water with, brain fog and mood and things like that is very much related to hydration as well.
I was wondering too about the role of a social worker in terms of support during times of perimenopause and menopause, and what that can look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So social worker is huge. It's like helping with managing stress, right? Like that's what we do a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, burnout is such a big thing for midlife women. We're trying to manage all the things: kids, career, aging parents, hormonal changes happening within our body, new relationships with our partner, losing girlfriends, gaining new friends. Like there's so many different and identity changes, right, as well, that are associated with women going through midlife. So there's such a big need for social work supports in terms of like reframing different thoughts, or like dealing with anxiety that they've never had before, that suddenly, because of the hormone shifts, they're having anxiety attacks, or, these new anxious moments and, thoughts that they've never had before. So learning about how to deal with those, and especially it's a big cause for sleeplessness as well, that people will wake up with those racing thoughts and those racing minds, and learning how to challenge those maladaptive thoughts, or calling them out as such, and things like that can really, really help. And just learning some different stress reduction techniques like mindful breathing and, grounding. So absolutely, there's a place for social work, just to, have an unbiased person there to listen to reframe, to validate, and to give you some really great techniques to help to kind of quiet the noise in our brains.
Definitely, yes, ways to help reduce that stress and manage symptoms, especially if they're, things we haven't experienced before, or might be feeling a bit more magnified just with the different things going on in our life at the time. Are there any resources out there that you would suggest that are helpful?
Yeah, the North American Menopause Society is a really great evidence-based organization. I would definitely be wanting to make sure that the information that you're following is evidence-based. So the Canadian Menopause Society also has some great resources, the North American Menopause Society, and then watching who you're following on Instagram is the biggest thing in social media, because so often there's so many different influencers out there that have ulterior motives. So they are, promoting supplements that are going to help with menopause, and they are, the weight supplements and, weighted vests and all these great things that, you find out that they in fact have ulterior motives in terms of they're trying to sell a product, right? So I would just say be very, very careful about who you're taking advice from, what their background is. And if, do some digging. If they're selling a certain supplement, so I would just say watch those influencers that you're seeing, because it's very confusing online. You don't know what you're doing a lot of the times, like who you're following in terms of their background, and you can end up spending a lot of money and having a lot of, again, feelings of hope, and then feelings of potential failure, or this isn't working for me, or hopelessness if things don't actually come to fruition. So I would just say kind of have that lens when you're looking on different things on social media. That being said, Dr. Jen Gunter is the most phenomenal, resource for menopause support. So I would highly, highly recommend following her. And then again, the North American Menopause Society is a fantastic place to go get some support.
Yes, there's so much resources out there. It's hard to know. And this is why I wanted to have a podcast, is to kind of, put out there some authentic, genuine support and guidance, right? And expertise, because it's so hard to know. And I sometimes think of social media as like it's a giant infomercial. And would I sit there and watch, a giant infomercial all day or buy things from it without researching? And so it's looking into, again, credentials, expertise, and if things are being advertised to purchase. So all great tips.
Just make sure who you're watching is actually certified in what they're doing, and that they're not just, they took a weekend workshop or a course. You want to have some certification if you're going to drop some money, or, make some choices. Make sure that they know what they're talking about and have that background in terms of being registered, being certified, so you know that their information is actually accurate and reputable.
Helpful. And I was wondering if you could share about your workshops and resources, Meghan, if people are wanting to learn more about menopause or have a community of support around them and some guidance where they can connect with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is just at Meghan Schrumm. I also have a website, www.meghanschrumm.com. So super simple. I have information on my website and on my Instagram about the different counseling, the one-on-one counseling that I offer, again, whether it's social work related or whether it's nutrition, more wellness lifestyle related. But then also I am running a 5-week menopause masterclass. I ran it in the spring and I'm running it now in the fall again. So I'll be launching those dates in the next week or so. And what it is, it's a 5-week course and we deep dive into all the different aspects around those pillars of health type of thing. So week 1 is focused on hormones. And then we talk another week about cardiovascular health, another week on sleep, another week on weight management, another week on bone health, and kind of deep dive into all those factors, and as well as prevention. So a lot of things are like looking at, what happens as you go through the menopause transition, what happens to your bone health, and going forward, looking at how can we prevent, or slow down the risk of osteoporosis, and what kinds of nutrients can we have and what to watch for, and those types of things. So even for people who have already gone through the transition, there's still a lot of information there about prevention as we age, and specifically as we age as females, because there are specific, sex-specific risk factors for us on our own.
And seeing what changes can help make things a little bit easier.
Yeah, and how to supplement and even when to supplement, because not everybody needs supplements, right? And that's another big misconception, that everybody should be taking certain supplements and that's just not the case. So knowing about how to know when you need a supplement or how to know when to talk to somebody about those types of things. So we definitely deep dive into all those things as well in my 5-week course. Yeah, it's really nice it's on Zoom, so you have access to me live for questions. But also it just creates this beautiful community of like-minded women going through the same kind of phase. So it's a really nice space.
It creates an opportunity to talk about it. Like I said, sometimes it's just joked or not really mentioned. And it's nice to be able to just share what you're going through and to normalize it.
Exactly.
So thanks so much for your time today, Meghan. I appreciate getting to know more about your expertise and learning about perimenopause and menopause.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.